Chapter 5 happens years later, and now the Babylonian Empire has crumbled. Daniel is no longer the king's advisor. The king is long past dead. His grandson is now on the throne. And the empire has gone downhill. A young prince named Cyrus with an older general named Darius have created a civil war in the Persian Empire, in Persia, and they've kind of taken over from Cyrus's grandfather up in Assyria. The civil war went so good, they thought, hey, let's keep it going. Babylonians are crumbling, let's go down there. They're all kind of related. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were built by Nebuchadnezzar for his Persian wife, who was a Persian princess, possibly related to Cyrus. And so there were good political ties back and forth through all these lands. This is pretty much a bloodless takeover. But on the night when the city is being surrounded, Belshazzar, the king, decides it's a good time to throw a party. And they would appeal to the gods and all this kind of stuff. So all this is going, according to his silly plan. And then he orders the vessels from the temple in Jerusalem to be brought in. And they are not praising God or doing anything. He's thanking the gods of silver and gold and, just doing anything he can do. It's a drunken party. And you know the story, the writing on the wall, which was visible to everyone. It wasn't disappearing ink. It says in some versions of the Bible, it was written into the plaster of the wall. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin, measured, weighed and wanting, your kingdom is divided and given to the Persians. So, of course, again, nobody can figure out what that writing means. What are we going to do? And so the queen mother, may have been Nebuchadnezzar's daughter or whatever, comes in and says, what about Daniel? Well, Daniel's been out of the government. The king doesn't even know about him. He calls Daniel in, and he gives Daniel a promise. He says, you know what, if you can read this for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make you the third ruler in the empire. Now, there were already two, but Belshazzar doesn't know that Nebuchadnezzar had already been taken captive. But he says the third ruler. The third ruler in the Babylonian Empire. Normally that would be a good thing, but it's like saying you're the third ruler of a sinking ship at this point. Daniel looks like a young man here. Daniel is well in his 80s, possibly his 90s by now. All right? So Daniel's about 90 years old, and he tells the king, keep your gifts and give them to somebody else if you want, but I will tell you what it says. He says, and this is very important in the story, look what God did to Nebuchadnezzar, and you should have learned from that. Everybody knew what God did to Nebuchadnezzar, but Belshazzar decided to disregard it. You could say, children, the stories of the Bible are really important, and God has them there for us so that we can learn from them. Well, he didn't learn, and now does a king worship God in this chapter? You have a king worshiping God in all the chapters, well, almost except for chapter 1 so far. But you know what he does? Belshazzar realizes that he was wrong. Now, he doesn't ask God for forgiveness or anything, but he does make Daniel the third ruler in the kingdom of Babylon. That night, Belshazzar dies because the Persians come into the city and they take him out. That leaves Daniel as the last ruler of the Babylonian Empire. Question should arise, why does Darius keep him around? Except Darius would have known Daniel. All of his life he would have known Daniel. And Cyrus too. Daniel was a pretty important man in Nebuchadnezzar's government. So now you have the Persian Empire. Persian Empire kind of hits the reset button. Why should the Jews be a protected people anymore? This is one of the most important chapters in the Old Testament, because the Jews could have faced extinction here. The next time that would happen would be the book of Esther. But right here, at the beginning of the Persian Empire, the question is, can God help his people? So you have Daniel, and they don't like Daniel. Okay, actually, the king is going to make Daniel the #1 guy, right? Why would you do that? except for the king knew about Daniel, right? Keep that in mind. So they come to the king and they say, you know what, king? Nobody should pray to any other god except you. You subjugated the people by getting them to compromise religiously. So the king thinks this is a good idea, but he doesn't know that a trap has been laid. So they catch Daniel praying to his God. Now, this is very important. Go to chapter 9, and you'll see what Daniel was praying. He was praying for his people because he had read in the book of Jeremiah that the exile was coming to an end. Now, it makes Daniel look a little bit older here than in the previous chapter. This happened within the same year. Okay, the first year of Cyrus was the year that Cyrus sent the people of Israel back. So this is all happening, right on the heels. So they go to Darius and they say, look, Daniel did a bad thing and he's praying to his God and all that. Darius now, strangely, is afraid. He's afraid because he learned of what God did with Nebuchadnezzar. I'm just giving you the short version of this. Belshazzar may not have learned, but Darius was afraid of Yahweh. And he knew what God had done during all the life of Nebuchadnezzar. That's why he doesn't eat. That's why he's afraid. That's why he rushes back to the tomb in the morning to see Daniel. And the king says, Daniel, are you okay? And Daniel says, yes, God sent his angel and he shut their mouths. And so they pulled Daniel out. And here's the important part of the story. Darius worships God, Yahweh. He's a Persian king. Duo kingship with Cyrus at the same time. He makes a law that is binding on the entire Persian Empire and says to them, if anyone makes a Jew worship any other god but Yahweh, they'll be punished. The Jews, once again now, at the beginning of the Persian Empire, the first year, they are protected people. God is saving his people. And the news of this goes back to Cyrus, who apparently really liked Darius. And Cyrus makes a decree that sends the Jews back to rebuild their temple. Now, I don't know if Darius was a believer. I don't know about Nebuchadnezzar. You could maybe put money down. I don't think Cyrus was. But they were all afraid or respectful of Yahweh. And that's all because of what God did through 4 teenage boys, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So, good stories, and in the sea of material, there's good songs to be sung, great memory verses. It's a wonderful story, and the kids will really enjoy this.